Am I afraid of competition? Are you afraid of competition? We're going to talk about that on this segment of the Gig Geezer. If this is your first time checking out the Gig Geezer, if you're a returning visitor of the Gig Geezer, thanks for coming by. And if you would not mind, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome your comments in the section below. I'm actually starting out on a delivery and transport opportunity, and I'll be driving for the next 2+ hours to the drop-off location. When I think of competition, initially, when I think of competition, I actually think of, and this is a true story. I still remember my first cousin and I basically arguing over my first cousin, who's 9 months older than me. He'll never admit to being older than me. But I remember here we are, we're barely out of pull-ups, arguing over a pool stick, a pool cue stick at a cafe, as what my grandmother once defined it as, but it was basically a hole-in-the-wall joint. We're like 2 years old, arguing over a pool cue stick, playing pool. So there was a little bit of competition between us two. That's my earliest example of competition. But then as you get older, what happens is there's human nature where you pit yourself against other people, and you're measuring your performance against another person, and that is competition. In the athletic realm, one's performance is measured by time and other measurable units or results. Baseball could be batting average. It could be strikeouts. It could be wins. It could be innings pitched. It could be saves. In track, it's the fastest time or the farthest distance or the highest height. So you get where I'm going. That is competition. And people train and discipline their bodies and their minds for that peak maximum performance. So what about in the so-called business world? How do you define competition? Well, competition is based on the number of people who are vying for a customer's business, and competition may be measured in price, but in various situations, competition is also measured in value. Okay? Value. The source of this segment of the Gig Geezer is based on some recent comments that appeared in a recent upload. And a commenter admonished me for really needing to be quiet and not put as much content out there that may encourage or promote people to get into the cargo van business. Although, if anybody has followed the Gig Geezer channel, I have long since stopped using the term cargo van business. In fact, I've given specific definitions. Even within recent weeks, I have mentioned how a sprinter/cargo van is a very versatile vehicle, and that the van is nothing more than the vehicle by which you conduct your business. So that means that it could be delivery and transport that you use your van for, or it could be for a mobile repair shop, tire repair shop, a mobile mechanic shop. It could be one that's used to haul off junk and debris, or it could be used for landscaping. It could be used as a mobile dog shop. In fact, as I mentioned about a mobile pizza shop, I even posted a picture in a community post several months back where a sprinter/cargo van was used as a gourmet ice business. In other words, they made their gourmet ice in the van, and kind of like the ice cream truck, but it's a gourmet ice van. So there's many things that a van can be used for to conduct one's business. So my talking about cargo van business, you won't hear me say that. I'm going to talk about delivery and transport, and I happen to use a sprinter/cargo van. That is not promoting cargo van business, because that's very inaccurate. What I'm doing is promoting somebody to be an entrepreneur, but they just happen to use a van for the purpose of conducting whatever business it is. Now, going back to competition, how do you then define competition in my space and in similar spaces? Okay, I mentioned about you may have let's say in a certain market space, you may have 10 people competing for these customers. And price may be a factor in a customer's consideration. But what they teach you in business and in sales, what you also have to compete for is value. How you can create value for what you offer, or your product, or your brand. This is just simple marketing. This is simple salesmanship, okay? This is not something that everybody talks about, at least in the YouTube space, at least this type of content that's being generated. Now, what I'm getting at is, since we're talking mostly about people who are working gig apps, be it gig food delivery apps or last mile gig delivery apps, or I'll even go as far as to talk about with brokered opportunities. The competition, it's not really competition. You're competing against supply and demand. And unfortunately, the gig apps actually has some bearing on the supply and demand. Now, I just found it interesting this week that an article out of San Francisco, DoorDash has informed those who've been inquiring about being onboarded onto the app in the San Francisco market area, the Bay Area, that they are being placed on a wait list. I find that odd, because for years DoorDash has taken anyone and everyone. Well, what has been talked about from time to time among us content creators is how markets have been hypersaturated. They're hypersaturated because these gig apps, in their greed to compete for customers, they have flooded the market with the availability of drivers to meet the demand of orders. I hope I'm making sense. Let me try this again. These gig apps have onboarded hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, to meet the demand that they anticipate on their apps. They feel that if they've got in a market, these people understand almost to the nth degree how many people it really take to adequately meet a market's demand on these apps. These apps can actually give you measured numbers. But in their greed, in their quest for market share, let's say that in one part of Columbia, South Carolina, all they need is really 200 drivers at any given time. They will onboard 2,000 drivers. They'll onboard 2,000 drivers, and maybe in part there is good reason for that, because not all 200 people are going to be on the app consistently at any given time and space. So if in meeting the demand, they may onboard 2,000 people. They will go and take it a step further and onboard another 2,000 people. So they may onboard 4,000 people for 200, for really what would take 200 people to meet a market's demand. Now, the problem exists when all 4,000 people are on the app, or a significant number of that 4,000 people. Let's say if 3,000 people on the app, there's a lot of crows chomping at a very limited supply of corn. That is not competition. That is not competition. That is not competition. I know I've said it 3 times, but that is not competition. And so this is part of the problem that we face working these gig apps. Now, the other problem is that the pricing, the offers that we have are generated by algorithm. Correspondingly, what I've noticed and what I've mentioned is that when an app first is introduced into the market, that is when a person is really going to make their most money, because there are not as many people on the app, and because of that, the driver is going to have pretty much a good opportunity to earn some decent money. But as more people are added onto the app, well, guess what? It's going to drive down the offers, the offer amounts. That's not competition. That, again, is supply and demand. Let's put it like this. Now, you can talk about inflation. Inflation is another factor in how prices go up, and stay on the upward path. But let's just look at gas prices. A few years back, gas prices took a nosedive. And a few years back, I'm talking about 2020, 2021. 2020, 2021, there were fewer people on the road. So therefore, there was not as much demand for gas. And so there was this glut, this oversupply of gas, and so prices dropped inherently. But as people started getting back out there, the demand increased and gas prices started creeping back up. That is supply and demand. Okay. Now, if there were fewer people on the app, it is possible logically thinking, it is possible that if fewer people on the app, maybe price offer amounts would go back up. But I doubt it with these gig apps. They're also competing against other gig apps to stay in business. And so their way of staying competitive is to keep prices down, or to keep prices down, because it allows them to operate at a higher margin, profit margin. So I know I'm talking like a professor and all, but that's pretty much my personality. But I also want to give you a little bit of insight about competition. Competition is what we're talking about in the YouTube space, in the YouTube sphere, and what people may think with gig apps. It's not really competition. It's supply and demand. And if there's too many people out there, it fucks things up. It's as simple as that. Okay. And these gig apps, unfortunately, are not a part of the solution. They are going to be forever part of the problem, because they feel that in order to remain competitive among other apps, they've got to keep a supply of people out there. They're always going to be onboarding people. And every now and then, there may be a wait list. But by and large, they're always looking to keep a certain supply of people to meet their demand for their customers. I want to add this other thought. You've heard of stuff coming a dime a dozen. They're all a dime a dozen. It's just a dime a dozen. In other words, there's so many people out there that, because there's so many people out there, you don't pay peak price for the same thing. Now, how does that relate to then the ownership and operation of a sprinter/cargo van, or this conversation about competition? Well, those of us who deal with brokers and bid for brokered opportunities, there's a term called capacity. In other words, there's a lot of fucking drivers out here. And because there's such a glut of drivers, basically, we are a dime a dozen. Because there are so many of us, there is no true demand for carriers right now. 2020, 2021, I go back to that because that was a time, although I did not have a sprinter/cargo van, I had no thoughts of doing what I'm doing right now. But it's my understanding that people really made some money back in 2020, 2021. And you can make the analogy with gig food apps. Because there was such a demand, people were really paying for those of us who were willing to go out there and brave, risk our lives to bring them food that some appreciated and a lot didn't. Likewise, in the brokered opportunity realm, pardon my use of words there, but I'm just talking in the way that I understand it. In the spot market, because brokers were clamoring to try to meet the demand of transporting goods and items, and because there was not enough people to meet that demand, those who were in the game at that time were able to command top dollar. They were not a dime a dozen. No, they were paying like $10 a dozen as opposed to a dime a dozen. Get where I'm going? So as it is now in 2024, it is frustrating to deal with brokers because they're putting out offers at a lot of times at some very shameful, embarrassing rates. And they're playing the numbers game, counting on that there's enough people out there that will slit their throats, or as my grandmother would say, cut their nose off and spite their face just to say that they got a fucking brokered opportunity to say that they're moving. Now, when I've talked to brokers about that, when I've pretty much said, hey, look, man, I'm not one of those thirsties. I'm not gonna bid those type of numbers. Oh, I understand, geezer, but there's a lot of competition out there. Do you call that competition? That is not competition. You're not competing against somebody in a race. I mean, maybe some people see a race to zero or a fast nosedive to zero as competition. I don't see it as competition. I have come to understand that what we're dealing with is an issue of supply and demand. There's so many people out there. There's enough people out there that they're counting on that will take these bids at some very shameful and appalling rates. I'm going to articulate an example. Recently, there was, in fact, yesterday, July 17, 2024, there was from a broker whom I competed a number of opportunities in 2023, had offered a load from Latson, South Carolina to Atlanta for, it was according to them, 308 miles, and they offered $300. I have done I have covered the similar distance, maybe a little less depending on which way you take. In fact, I've talked about some opportunities from that area, but I have done a number of opportunities ranging from $475 to $625. So you think that I'm gonna go along with that? In fact, it took them 4 attempts before somebody actually went with it. I bid 550 and never dropped. And when I did speak to a broker and they told me 300, I said, oh no, I'm looking at a lot more. And they hung up on me, and I'm like, fine. But that's just one example. Another example from the same broker. In fact, it happened a few days earlier in the week. There was a pickup from Charlotte going to North Charleston. So that's basically a 200-mile drive. And they were offering $150. Yes, $150 fucking dollars. So they might have got somebody for 200. Just like on the other one, they might have got somebody for 300, 325, 350. I'm guessing that's about as far as they went. But yeah, that's when you're playing a dime a dozen. And so they're counting on that glut, that great supply of people. Had that been a situation like 2020, 2021, I'm certain that load opportunity probably would have gone for at least $600. At least based on what I've come to understand with this business, easily $600 or better. So here's the payoff pitch for all that I've shared over the last several minutes. To me, competition is when I am competing against someone else, and the measurement of achievement or production or results is based on earnings or number of opportunities, but mainly earnings. So it would be who earned more money over that given day, week, or month. Competition to me is not when it is an all-out race to the bottom, as what appears to be in a lot of bidding type situations, or for that matter, if you would say with the last mile gig delivery apps, or for that matter, gig food delivery apps, when you have people who are willing to take some of the most obscene, horrible, shameful offers out there. That is not competition. That is just bad business. And it actually is hurtful for everyone who's involved, because with these gig apps, with something that is algorithm based, it is basing things on that pool of people's preferences. It's based on their past selections. And if that algorithm determines, say for example, a 50-mile trip transporting 1,000 pounds is worth $50, it's going to come back out for that. And it's betting on the fact that there is someone out there that will transport 50 miles, 1,000 pounds for $50, when something like that should go for at least $200, $250. So I hope you get where I'm coming from. I hope you get something out of this segment of the Gig Geezer. And if you do, if you like the content that's been provided in this segment or in any other segment, hit that subscribe button, give my content a thumbs up, share my content among others, and I definitely welcome comments in the section below. I'm in Wood Lane. As always, may your grind and may your hustle continue.